Hello everyone and welcome to the tavern. I'm the Dapper Bard and today we are talking about G-Quuuuux yet again. Now I want to point out that thus far I've been enjoying the series, but in a discussion with a friend, he did bring up some valid problems with the show. Now he hates it more than me, primarily because he really doesn't like the character designs or the mech designs, which, okay, I mean that's down to personal taste. But we did agree on the problems with the story and with the characters. Now, I've been generally optimistic thus far, but here's the thing. The title card you just saw was a joke my brother and I made when we saw the next time at the end of episode 4. We saw some DOMs, and we're like, oh, it's the Black Zwei Stars. And then it turns out to be the Black Zwei Stars. Our joke became reality. That is never a good sign. That happened when we were working on the Fallout review. That happened when we were working on the G-Witch reviews. It has happened with a few other shows. Don't do that, creators. If our sarcastic jokes are your reality, that is a problem. Because it means we're in clown world, and you're going to give us garbage content. So let's hope this doesn't happen again. But my optimism is waning very fast. So let's get started with the analysis of G-Quuuuux, Episode 5. It is hard to say when this story takes place. I'm assuming it's the next day after the events of number 4. But what we do know is that the 2 remaining members of the Black Tri-Stars are interested in entering a mobile suit battle in order to get their reputation back. Because apparently they were fired from the military at the end of the war by Makuve for some reason. You know, ace pilots always just tossed out the window like they're trash. Sure. Yeah. Also, MASH became a mayor and got in trouble. I mean, there's a news article they show you, so that's a thing. This wasn't thought out too well, I don't think. Then we cut to the Pomeranians, and they're just chilling. And the characters basically make a comment about how Machu is feeling a little bit upset after seeing someone die. And then we see Machu, sunglasses on, just chilling. Just hanging out. Didn't seem too bothered by anything. And then the boss lady shows up, and she's like, hey, I got snacks. Let's talk about stuff. And then she's like, okay, cool, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, deep emotional trauma there. We then cut to the Zeons, and Girl Zeon is like, hey, Chelia Bull, like, are we gonna do anything with the G-Quuuuux? And did you know Xavier is out there, like, investigating, and you're just here? And he's like, yep, I sure am. Just waiting around, chilling. Because God forbid anyone be proactive. We also, during the sequence, see Xavier questioning people and actually get into a fight with a dude because he's going to the rough part of town, trying to get information on illegal fights. When we finally get a scene with Xavier, he is talking to another guy about how he probably shouldn't trust Chelia Bull for reasons. So it's starting to set up a tension thing between them. That's kind of cool. We then cut into Machu being sad as she's listening to her headphones. Then she runs off in a little montage where she meets up with Neon and they grab food and they visit Suji and kind of talk about nothing. And I think it's supposed to be implied here that Suji is feeling sick because his face is flushed and he's kind of out of it. Except for the fact that, like, normally when a character is designed to be sick, they sniffle, they sneeze, they cough. There's these indicators you give to the audience that someone isn't feeling good. And they don't really do that. In fact, I didn't think he was feeling sick until a little bit later when I'm like, wait, is he actually supposed to be sick? Because there wasn't enough indication of it. I don't need things spelled out for me, but again, some coughing, some sneezing, some shivering, you know, things that normally happen when you're sick would have been nice. Anyhow, the group is just hanging out and they talk about nothing. Then it's brought up about what the Kira Kira is because Neon is curious about it. And she explains that it's these sparkly things that occur when her new type powers happen, and how it reminds her of an ocean, and she wants to go to Earth. So we're reinforcing that whole let's go to Earth thing. Neon is like, okay, sure, whatever. This is followed by Suji talking about how the metal of his mobile suit is really comfortable and cold, and he likes it. So, in the most human scene ever made, Nyan just strips her clothes off completely and lays down on the Red Gundam. Needless to say, Machu is like, wait, what? Okay. And then she strips down too. Because we needed pointless fan service here with characters acting completely out of character. The uptight girl and the nervous girl both stripping their clothes in front of a guy they barely know because reasons. Well, okay, we know what those reasons are. The perverted staff that created this show. Because nothing like a bunch of 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds basically going, you know, it'd be great here. 2 teenage girls stripping down to their underpants. And I'm not making that up. That's literally what the scene is for. There's no reason for them to behave this way. They could have taken off their jackets and laid down on the Gundam. They didn't have to lay down on the Gundam at all. We could have had a conversation about how Suji is sick. Anyhow, the only relevant part of this sequence is that Machu references how they need 2 more wins and they have enough money to fly to Earth. Coolsies. We then cut to a little bit later with Xavier feeling like his search is a waste of time. And in the subway station he's at, he happens to run into Nyan and Machu. You know, by sheer luck. Anyhow, they get stopped by some cops because they recognize Nyan as a refugee somehow. Sure, I guess they just know. And the thing is, you didn't have to write it like this. They could have just been harassing the girls because they're jerks. They could have had a little device that has the faces of different wanted criminals. And they could have said, wait a second, she looks like the person on the wanted list. Or they could have been the cops who recognized her when they were chasing her before. There are ways of doing this, and instead they ran up and go, hey, you refugee, what are you doing here? And it's like, what? At the very least, do a Dina Papira Beta type moment, because at least that I'd go, okay, they're just checking people's IDs. Got it. Why they randomly know, they just do. Anyhow, Machu kicks one of them in the junk, and the girls run off through the place. Xavier grabs Machu, pulls her into a locker, and they hide inside the locker together, which also makes very little sense, because if he was smarter, he would have hid her in the locker and said, shut up, stay there, the guards will lose track of you in a couple minutes. Then he could have followed her to the Pomeranian hideout and gotten his G-Quuuuux back. But he's an idiot. So instead, they stay stuck in the locker, and he's going to wait for the Gundam battle to happen so that he can go and prove that she's the G-Quuuuux pilot, because the G-Quuuuux will have to forfeit without its pilot. Genius. There totally couldn't be a backup pilot. No, sirree, that could never happen. Speaking of backup pilots, Nyan is like, oh my gosh, they're going to lose the Gundam match if no one is in the cockpit of the G-Quuuuux. And this matters to me for some reason, even though there's nothing to indicate I'm the kind of person who would put my life on the line for other people. In fact, most of the time I come off as just being very self-centered. So she rushes over to the Pomeranian base and just gets inside it. And the Pomeranians are like, oh, there she is. And the boss lady's like, she look a little thinner to you? To which I'd say, I don't know if she's more thin than Machu, but she's for sure taller than Machu. Either way, they just kind of like, yeah, I guess that's Machu. We're idiots. Like most of the characters in this show. We then have our big clan battle. Xavier is watching on his phone with Machu. Machu is shocked that someone is using the G-Quuuuux. In fact, she's quite upset about the fact that someone can use the G-Quuuuux, making a comment saying that the Kira Kira is for me and Suji only. So that's a nice little moment there. The Black 2 stars end up winning it first. Then Nyan goes crazy, new type, to a point that she actually gets violent and aggressive. Like even the G-Quuuuux initially is trying to fight her activating the system. It feels very cyber new type to me, but who knows? Anyhow, then she Deus Ex Machinas her way through the fight. No big deal. We then have Chalia Bull being like, maybe we should order some backup. And then Machu, being very upset, runs to the base, sees the cockpit open, sees Haru like bounce out, being very scared of what he witnessed in the fight. And then she sees Nyan step out of the cockpit because apparently she wasn't smart enough to figure out that it was Nyan piloting her suit. And that's where our episode ends. When I finished watching this episode, I basically said, oh cool, I could essentially synopsize this as the Black Tri-Stars show up, Nyan is a substitute pilot and wins. The fact that this show is 20-some minutes of mostly fluff, with a couple little minor plot points occurring, is starting to get old to me. It feels like they front-loaded the first 3 episodes of quite a bit of story and ideas, and now they're kind of in the run-in-place segment of the show. We have twice had new antagonists introduced, who are just immediately wiped out in a Gundam fight. That's it. Like, no character development. Sure, we got our motifs and what have you, but motifs aren't story. The story is getting really weak, and that's a shock coming from people who gave us the genius writing of Evangelion and Fooly Cooly, two shows that have some of the most terrible scripts ever written. It doesn't get better for the characters. Characters remain the weakest part of the show. First we have Machu. Machu is sad, I guess? She doesn't really show it. We're told she's upset. She has one minor sequence when she's listening to her headphones, but nothing really comes of it. She doesn't question Suji about his ease with killing people, and she doesn't feel awkward about getting into another clan battle. She's just kind of like, well, you know, that happened. There's some potential for some drama with her and Neon because of the ending, and they seem to be doing some sort of love triangle thing with her, Neon, and Suji. But the problem is I actually have to care about the characters to care about the drama. And unfortunately, I have less and less reason to care about Machu as the series progresses, as her personality is, I am hot-blooded hero, and I want to go to Earth, which isn't a personality trait. It's a desire. Yeah. That's it. She's kind of an empty character. Speaking of empty characters, there's Suji. Suji is still like, I mumble about stuff and have no other value to the show. And then he might be sick. I don't know. He doesn't cough or sneeze. He makes a vague little thing of like, I'm feeling dizzy and kind of out of it. But he's always kind of out of it, so it's not a huge difference. You see his little robot pet thing, like check his temperature. So I guess that's supposed to indicate that he's sick or not feeling well. But you could have done something with that. You could have had him being sick, Machu takes care of him, Machu gets sick, and thus Neon needs to be the substitute pilot. That could have worked. Or Suji is sick, and they need a substitute, and Neon takes the red Gundam and has a weird experience. There are options here that they could have done with storytelling, and they do none of it with him. And every time he says something weird or cryptic, no one questions it. For 3 episodes now. For 3 episodes, no one questions anything Suji says or does. And it's getting a little bit old. You need to have something there. He needs to talk about something. They need to have some sort of connection. It's like, oh, we're hanging out all the time, and I guess no one talks. They just hang out and stare at the wall, or take a nap, or eat. Then we have Neon, the character I kept forgetting the name of because they didn't say it often enough, and she isn't really anything of a character. In fact, she's still not anything of a character. In this episode, she has almost no personality, as per usual. Occasionally says something a little bit snarky, but beyond that, there's nothing there. Then we see her flip out when her new type powers activate. She also hits Haro, which is not cool. That's like kicking the dog. You don't do that. If the show is trying to make me like this character, having her smack the mascot does not help me like the character. It helps me hate the character. Now, if we're going to turn her into an antagonist or something, cool. But again, that kind of heel turn feels like it's coming out of nowhere because to have a character go from mild-mannered to psychopath, it requires the contrast to be thoroughly explored. That is to say, I need to know what the baseline personality is to see the evil, darker side and have that mean something to me as the viewer. Versus, hey, look how just chill and whatever she is. Oh no, now she's like crazy and gonna murder stuff. It's almost as if the people don't know how to write characters. Then we have Xavier. He finally gets to do something. That's nice. He actually is proactive in trying to locate the G-Quuuuux, which I appreciate. And it isn't easy for him until he randomly stumbles into Machu, which, I mean, you know, sure, giant colony, of course you're going to run into her at the train station, amid a bunch of people. But still, they're trying to do something with him. I do appreciate that. It's better than him being completely useless. He doesn't really do much else, and even in his time with Machu, it's more of a ha-ha-ha. I will prove she's the G-Quuuuux pilot. What? The G-Quuuuux is launching anyways. Maybe I'm on the wrong track. And I'm like, oh, so you're just a moron. When it comes to our minor characters, they fare even worse, believe it or not. First, I want to talk about the Black 2 stars. This makes no sense to me. They would recognize the Red Gundam. They probably fought alongside him in several battles. And yet, they have no commentary about it. They're just like, let's beat up a Gundam and beat up the new Gundam-like. And like, that's it. And I'm like, look, Gaia's not a moron. Gaia was the leader of the group. He was a commander. He developed their strategies. But I guess he's just stupid now for some reason. Also, why did they get kicked out of the military? You don't usually kick out elite level pilots. The Black Tri-Stars have been a skilled unit since the Battle of Loom. You can't just throw them away, or if you do, you better have a good reason for it. I don't know why M'Quve would do that other than we need them to be in this competition, therefore they must be kicked out of the military. Then you have the fact that they're introduced just to be killed off. Now, to your average viewer, this probably doesn't mean much, but if you're a longtime fan of the Universal Century, the Black Tri-Stars hold a rank with M'Quve, Rambaral, characters like that, even Dozal Zabi for that matter, in terms of these antagonists who are very memorable for the fights they're involved with. The Battle of the Black Tri-Stars leads to the death of Lieutenant Matilda, which has a huge effect on Amuro and all of the White Base crew. And they're just treated like they're throwaway characters, just like that new character they created last episode who was apparently an ace pilot using a gun cannon in close quarters combat, which I wish I had thought about that sooner because that would be more reason to take points away from last episode. This is 2 episodes in a row where we have introduced characters just to kill them off, and with no real major payoff to it. It's not like Neon's gonna end up being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I went crazy in the cockpit, because that doesn't feel like the kind of writing this show employs. And Machu's shock about the death of the Witch Lady is nothing. It's barely there, if at all. They just introduced these characters from the original series just to kill them off with no major purpose to this. Even Chalia Bull's like, well, what are you going to do? Speaking of Chalia Bull, the Zeons are mostly useless. Chalia Bull's sitting on his hands. I still don't know the name of Lieutenant Girl. I don't even know what the Zeons are even doing inside 6 at this point if they're not going to proactively search for the mobile suits. Except for Xavier, who is proactively searching, but is still kind of a moron. I'm getting a little bit frustrated with how the characters are being treated in this show. Our main cast is almost completely devoid of personality, and our minor characters are useless, and introducing characters just to kill them off, while that is a Gundam trope, it's usually used with some sort of reason, or it provides some insight into a character or something, and this has provided nothing other than, hey, these clan battle fights, they sure are killing a lot of people. In fact, if I was going up against the Pomeranians, I'd probably drop out going, they're probably going to murder me. Because in the last 3 matches, 2 of their 3 matches have ended with the other team being murdered. So, yeah, how would they even get matches? This is giving me a headache, people. I wanted this show to be good. Let's talk about the aesthetics. They don't piss me off as much. As per usual, the aesthetics are pretty good. When it comes to the audio, there's a nice little scene where we get diegetic music with Machu with her headphones. She then takes the headphones off, the song becomes non-diegetic as we go into a montage. It's pretty nice. It's a J-pop song that I'm fairly certain they used in episode 1, so kind of makes it feel like that song is just part of this world, which is nice. Also, in the battle sequence, we get alternate battle music for Neon, which I also appreciate because it helps separate the characters and the story that's being told about them in the music. Finally, we get that stupid electronic sound again, which always happens around Suji, so I'm assuming it's part of his theme. It's highly annoying, and honestly, I don't know how anyone would have listened to that and go like, that's a sound effect we need to make sure we just blast 3 or 4 times an episode. When it comes to the visuals, of course, we have more references to the water motif. Cool. But like I said last time, you gotta do something with it. You can't just say water, right? Water. Water can be metaphorical and stuff and things. Again, would love that to actually mean something more than just, hey, water. We then have our fan service segment, which I did rant about earlier, but I want to kind of get into it a bit more here. I understand the 2 girls being stripped to their bra and panties is somewhat metaphorical for them to be at the beach, but there's better ways of doing that. And again, it feels really out of character for them to behave this way. Now, when it comes to fan service in anime, I'm generally fine with it, as long as the series is more authentic with it, I guess, for lack of a better word. What I mean is, if male protagonist walks into room and girl is changing, fine, because that could happen. Shower scene, okay, gratuitous, but people do need to shower. Or a hot spring sequence. Those have appeared in tons of animes. I'm more or less fine with that. That's things people do, and they happen to be naked at the time. There's ways of doing it that would have been like, okay, that's natural for the scene. Not two characters who have shown no inclination towards exhibitionism immediately go and say, you know what? Shuji's just laying down, dying. Boop. Closing off. And it feels super out of character for both girls for completely different reasons. Nyan doesn't have much of a personality, but what we do have is she tends to be a bit sarcastic, and she tends to be a little bit standoffish. Those aren't usually the traits of someone who will just strip their clothes off. And Machu seems to be a bit more nervous and reluctant to do things. However, she does seem to give into peer pressure pretty quick, so I guess I could kind of forgive that, but it still seems like her initial response of disgust and shock should have made her yell at the characters or something and then storm off. There's something you could have done with that, but they didn't. They're just like, hey, you want to see these girls in underwear, don't you? And I'm like, not really. They're not really designed to be sexy. They just aren't. They're very kind of plain-looking characters, for lack of a better word. These characters don't feel like they were designed for that, so it just comes off weird and awkward. This isn't like that sex scene from Seed or the various sequences in 8th MS Team. It feels really out of place and very pervy. And it's one of those things where I feel dirty just having to talk about it. And it just feels so out of place that you can tell it was a behind the scenes choice of oh, this would be a good excuse to get those girls out of their clothes, right, bro? And the guy's like, hell yeah, bro. And I'm like, no? How about we just have a moment where Neon's in the shower and she's like, oh man, I'm thinking about giant robots and I'm naked right now, right? That would at least be something that would kind of work. This just feels so awkward and gross. Finally, we have the fight. The fight is mostly good until it's not. So we got two problems here. First off, we have the Black 2 stars using the Jetstream attack. Except the Jetstream attack can't work in space because there's no air. You literally can't create a Jetstream in space. It worked on land because they could create that air pressure in order to move and go bam, 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 and hit the guy really quick. To be difficult to dodge. Even if you dodged the first attack or deflected it, you'd still have two more fast hits you couldn't dodge. With two characters, it doesn't work as well, but without the Jetstream, you could easily just dodge everything, which kind of happens, basically. Yan getting her little Deus Ex Machina new type powers and then going completely crazy with them better be explained. Best I can tell, she might be a cyber new type or something, and didn't realize she could activate these powers, but I feel like it'll get a hand wave response of just oh wow, I just didn't expect the intensity of the battle, which will be pretty weak sauce. Overall, the aesthetics, not as strong this episode. While the music remains fairly good, the visuals themselves are really, really starting to wear on me, primarily because of choices made by the art staff. And while I think the DOMs had a fairly decent design, there isn't much else I could really say about them, which is why I didn't talk about them in the main segment. And no matter how good certain parts are, it's ruined by the mistakes made by the production staff. All right. This has been a rough review. Let's get to the final verdict. This episode was a mess. First off, I'm getting sick of no one questioning Shuji. I'm getting a little bit sick of introducing characters just to kill them off. I am getting sick of no real plot outside of, hey, let's go to Earth. I mean, it's a goal. Plot? Not really. All the fears I had about the series of the bad writing, possibly weak character motivations, stuff never being fully explained, other issues you would find in Evangelion, they're all starting to come true, and it's really worrying me because I began liking this series, and I would like to end liking this series, but I doubt anything that occurred in this episode will have any major payoff or consequence, because thus far nothing that has happened has had any major payoff or consequence. Even the flashback episode is starting to seem like, what was the point? This could have been 2 lines of dialogue by Shalia Bull. And yes, I understand the point. It was to get people like me going, oh my god, they recreated that scene, and oh my god, they said the line. In defense, I did get like that. It probably helped bump that score up a little bit higher. But the problem is, the member berries are starting to not taste so good. Killing off the Black Tri-Stars was not a good choice. Continuously saying, ooh, something might happen, doesn't really keep me invested in the show. I'm not going to quit the show, and I don't want to quit the show, but I'm really afraid the show is just going to continue to go downhill. Bear in mind, we're on episode 5 of 12. There are 7 episodes left, and we barely have a plot and we barely have characters. That's a big problem. And the longer that problem persists, the more it's going to hurt the scores of these episodes, because I can no longer give it the, well, they're setting things up, or, well, we're just trying to get to know our characters right now. We'll explore them further, obviously, as the story progresses. Those excuses no longer exist. It's put up or shut up, G-Quuuuux. And I get the feeling you can't hang with the big boys. That's why my final verdict for episode 5 is 2 out of 5. The story is nearly non-existent, the characters are weak, while the audio is good, and the visuals were mostly fine, the show itself isn't as fun to watch as it was in the beginning. The reasoning why is that I wanted good characters and good story, and lo and behold, I'm not getting them. That reduces my enjoyment of a show. The sad thing is, when I was told about the premise, I was like, oh, okay, so like a Zoid Zero kind of thing. Zoid Zero should never be considered the positive version. That show is mostly empty calories. For those who don't know, it features a team of giant robot pilots who are in essentially a giant robot battle sport. And they go up against different teams, and that's basically the plot. There's kind of Team Evil that they face off with every once in a while, but for the most part, it's basically just match of the day episodes. Which, granted, if this had just been, hey, mobile suit combat but sport, I could probably get behind it. If this was like Girls und Panzer, but we have giant robots, that sounds pretty fun. And while its plot wouldn't be that strong, we probably could at least have some cool matches, some interesting strategy, stuff like that. Which again, I guess wouldn't make it any real different than a Build Fighters series. But, you know, that's at least something. This is nothing. And that's kind of depressing. We have no real themes. Characters are created just to be thrown away. And characters who we could have done something with, like Machu's mother, or the members of the Pomeranians, or any of the other Xeon characters, they're just ghosts. Empty vessels there to facilitate the story. Tell me what you thought about the episode. Is it kind of grating on you too? You kind of wishing this had a real plot? Even something as basic as, oh my gosh, there's a war and I'm a teenager and I must pilot a giant robot against my will to fight the war? I mean, cliche as that is, it works. Thank you for watching this far. Please like and subscribe. And check out some of my other videos. I have reviewed quite a few Gunpla over the years. So if you're into those, you got something to check out. Otherwise, I'll be back next week with another G-Quuuuux review. And until then, I'll see you at the tavern.